Welcome to MyLife, Chassidus Applied, episode 28. Being that we're in the 9 days, the saddest time of the Jewish calendar, and the challenges that the Jewish people face everywhere, especially in Israel, continue. So I just want to open with a few words. The Rebbe, among many things that he contributed, many things that he innovated, as a true leader of a time, focuses on the needs of that particular time. Parnas lefiat tzibur. A leader is according to his flock, because every flock has its needs and every generation has its requirements. One of the things we find that you don't really see by the other Rabbeim to that extent was the transformation of the 9 days and the 3 weeks, and of course Tisha B'Av itself, into springboards and catalysts for great growth. The Rebbe often cited the Minchas Elazar, the Mukatcher Rebbe, said, Mishanichnas of mamayitim besimcha. So the literal meaning is, as of enters, we diminish in joy. But there's another way to read it. Mishanichnas of mamayitim. You mamayit. You diminish the effects and the impact of and the sadness besimcha, through joy. Kemuven, joy al pi Torah and al pi halacha. And that's why the Rebbe instituted. Over the years, it continuously intensified. The simcha al pi Torah is learning Torah, which is misameach the lev, which brings joy to a person. But learning Torah in a way, obviously, that's permitted. And the way that's permitted, the Rebbe spoke about the siyumim in the 9 days. When you make a siyum, it's a time of simcha. You're allowed to make a sudas mitzvah. In the 9 days, it's permitted. The Mela, it's a way of diminishing in a Torah-dika way. Learning Hilchas Beis HaBchira and learning about the Beis HaMikdash in the general 3 weeks. And of Tisha B'Av itself, also making a siyum, Masechta Moed Katan, and learning that which is permissible to be learned. The question is why? Why did the Rebbe emphasize this? Why was it not so much focused? You could always make a siyum. We know the custom starts from the Rebbe Rashab, say from Minhagim. The Rebbe Nohag here, Minig, to make a siyum every one of the 9 days. Not in order to eat meat, but in order to make the siyum. But why did the Rebbe make such focus on this? So if you look consistently in the Rebbe's approach to things, was always looking to find the good in everything, which is really the approach to Torah in general, and Chassidus in particular. But especially in our times, things after all the harsh decrees, including the Holocaust, and so much has already been so-called cleansed. We've gone through everything as a Jewish people. Perhaps the Rebbe saw that one of the last shlovim, the last stages, before Mashiach and Gula, is to reveal the deeper Pnimius Hatev within these days. And that's why more emphasis to do things that to reveal that. Because as the Rambam brings from the Psukim, Zechariah and the other Nevuas, these days should be transformed into holidays and simcha, and they will be transformed. And it says in the Medrash that Tisha B'Av will be the greatest yontiv, because the greatest good and the greatest joy lies in the most darkest of times. Which is why on Tisha B'Av Mashiach was born in the throes of the abyss, when the flames were highest. Tisha B'Av afternoon we say Nachem, as the Arizal explains, because that's when Neilad Mashiach and Shal Yisrael. The famous Medrash, Gosa Pora, a person was traveling in the north of Israel. He met an Arab farmer, and he heard the cow groan. So he said, your temple was destroyed. The cow was groaning, sensed that the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Then a moment later, there was another groan from the cow, or a few moments later, and he said, Neilad Mashiach and Shal Yisrael. That there was the machle and the refuah really immediately came. Dafka in the throes of Tisha B'Av, because that's how it is. And there's so many sikhs and mamorim that talk about this. Chayev Adam Lifkid des Ishtei before he goes to Medinas Hayam. That's why the Kruvim, the two cherubs that were on top of the pareches, on top of the, I should say kaperis, on top of the Aron, the ark, were facing each other when they came in to destroy the temple. Of all times when they faced each other, we know it was Estranged Shalmakim. It was a sign that there was a chiba, there was a love between the Jewish people and God. Here was a time of wrath, kavyachol. So the answer is because in the darkest moment lies the deepest love, with all the different explanations of it. And the Rebbe made effort, physical effort, to institute things that would reveal that deepest love, that would reveal that within the darkness lies the deepest light. The siyumim and all the other ways that the Rebbe did in order to reveal that joy. And this is in general the Rebbe's approach to difficulties and challenges. We're talking on the different shows and episodes of MyLife about how to deal with depression, how to deal with loneliness. We'll be talking about some of these matters soon in this episode. The underlying thing is that there's no such thing as total despair. Even the darkest of the dark has a spark, because nothing can exist without a spark of godliness. The question is how concealed it is. And by doing activities, al-pitera, that are allowed and are permitted in these days, simcha and other things that we do, as we conclude the Haftarah of Shabbos Chazain, we actually create the tipoda, the pidyon, and we redeem it because we reveal that deeper goodness that lies in this time. And you see this a consistent pattern, consistent teachings of the Rebbe. Whenever he speaks to people, trach gut v'zayin gut. Any complaints people would write about difficulties and challenges was always a voice and a message of empowerment. You can overcome it. You have the strength. Think positively. And not just as a zgula, as we know. It actually reveals, when you think positively, betochen actually reveals the deeper power that actually heals the situation. So the 9 days can be a symbol of a microcosm on this time of the calendar for all challenges in life. We all go through our 9 days in our personal lives, unfortunately. A loss, a death, a tragedy of all sorts. So the lessons that we learn from 9 days can be extrapolated and spill over into every area of life, of seeing the good within, the pnimius within. The Rebbe brings from the Tzemach Tzedek, Neira Teira Echa, Rishimas Anecha. Actually, the Rebbe printed it in the early years. I think it was in the beginning of the Nesius, the Toshin Yud, Yud Aleph. Rishimas Anecha, the Tzemach Tzedek writes that though Echa, which we say Tisha B'Av night, is all about the destruction, the lamentations, that Yirmiyahu Hanavi laments, Eicha Yoshva Bodat. And we say it in a tune of a mournful tune, with the lights dimmed. Yet the Tzemach Tzedek writes that Yesh Leimer, the psukim of Eicha Lemal Yusa, to see the positive, and he interprets pasuk by pasuk of Eicha, the sad Eicha, the positive side of it, which is of course based on the Likutei Torah B'Chukei, where he talks about Klolos, the Teichacha, which is in Bechukesai, Kisove, a little in Re'ei, a little in Hazinu, that the Teicha really, Bepnimius, is Chsadim Nistarim. But because there's such intense Chsadim, they can't come out in a revealed way, because revealed Kelim are limited. And he brings there the Gemara in Moed Katan of Rashbi and Rabbi Lozer, his son, who he sent him to the sages to get a bracha, and instead they cursed him. And he came back to Rashbi, he was all mortified. They cursed me. And Rashbi asked him, what did they say? So he started telling him what he said, and he said, the truth is, these are all brachas. And there's long explanations of why would they say it in a curse, in words of curses, if they want to say blessings. Say you should be blessed, you should have long life. Different answers. There's a beautiful sikha from the Rebbe on it. It's not for now because it's a different discussion. But he brings that Tzemach Tzedek and Agos and Likutei Torah B'Chukei, he brings this Gemara to explain the Alter Rebbe's words because there's deeper chsam. So his answer, the ultimate answer, is Mefarshei Talmud, Mefarshei Gemara give their answers. Briefly, there's an answer given because they saw that he was destined to experience these negative things. So to redeem it, they used those words, and that way they would use it toward the positive and transformed his destiny. Others say because Malachi Chabola, the negative angels, cannot know your thoughts, they only know your words. So they heard curses, so they wouldn't oppose. When it's true, the thought, the kavanah in these words was a positive one. And the Tzemach Tzedek's Hagah in the Likutei Torah tells us that the reason they used these words because regular words were too limited to contain the deep chsadim, the deepest and hidden chsadim, the starim, that come in the... And this is all to explain how in Eicha, in the saddest thing, you find the biggest power. So these days are special days in that way, and Kamuvin all done al pi Torah and al pi halacha, but you can free and you can redeem the hidden sparks and the deepest sparks that are a product of the thousands of years of Golus that we've been in. Both obviously Golus Edom after Churban Bayis Sheni, but also as a result of Churban Bayis Rishon. And we should definitely use these days. The Eiros are very practical to add in Torah and in Tzedakah Mishpat. Mishpat is Torah Halacha, especially in the laws connected to these days, the laws of Beis Hamikdash and so on. And in Tzedakah, both those things are zgulas, are tools to help us free those sparks and redeem these days. Let's go to some of the questions that have come in, including some follow-up to the previous episode, where I didn't have time to go through all the questions, and I will continue to do so. But I'd like to go first to some new topics, and then we'll do some follow-up. The topic is fraudulent doctors. I live in a community where a couple, and in another letter it's where individuals, peddle psychological and life coaching therapies to their fellow members of Anash, to their community members. They promote themselves as legitimate, fully qualified doctors using their Jewish names and even going so far as to Hebraicize their surnames so as to appear Geza. Unfortunately, they not only lack a sound understanding of many basic Jewish and Chassidic concepts, but it was also recently revealed that they obtained their professional licenses through the procurement of degrees from an unaccredited out-of-state diploma mill. When several young professionals queried the local Rav on the issue, he unceremoniously brushed them off. This team continues to receive business via their association with the Rav and the Shul, despite continued complaints from both health professionals and laymen alike that their services are far more harmful than useful. In fact, there were several instances within the past year alone in which they were each accused of severely bungling treatment protocols, leading to significant mental and physical anguish in the very people they were entrusted to treat. Unfortunately, this is not an isolated incident. I regularly hear of phony health professionals who use the guise of frumkeit to foist their worthless services on a well-intentioned, albeit gullible populace. The phenomenon is so pervasive that I believe most people are unaware it's even abnormal. As a community prides itself in upholding the Rebbe's standards and ideals, we must improve on educating and informing one another about such dangers. To that end, would you please offer your own understanding of how the Rebbeim, specifically the Rebbe, would approach and untangle this growing epidemic of professional charlatanism within our walls? I smile because the use of words very well phrased and articulate. And I chose to discuss this. Number one, I don't censor any questions that come in. I just hope that this does not in any way besmirch anyone, no names being used, and I hope they can't figure out which community. I don't know, because this is all anonymous that are submitted in our forum, and I should use this opportunity to mention that forum. You can submit your anonymous questions, completely anonymous, in a forum, impossible to trace, at meaningfullife.com/MyLife Live. If you want to write to me personally and do want a response, because I cannot respond through that forum, because I have no way of knowing who, please write to me at Simon, my name, SIMON, at meaningfullife.com. Now, to respond to this question. So we thank God we have a Torah, we have a Shulchan Aruch. And as the Rebbe very often would say to people who asked him questions, he would say, I'm telling you the obvious, which if you looked in Shulchan Aruch, you would have seen on your own. The Rebbe and all the Rabbeim are Shulchan Aruch Eden. We're talking about Torah Eden. So this question is not just a question to the Rebbe, it's a question in general. What does the Torah say? We know Nitne Reshus l'Reifel l'Rapes, it says V'Rapi Yirapele. And I discussed this the early parts of this episodes when MyLife was first launched. Back now, it's 28 weeks ago. Who would believe? That I discussed at length the mere axiom and principle, the foundation of this whole discussion. How do we heal? How do we deal with issues? So I'm not going to repeat what I've said there. You can refer to those early episodes. But clearly, there's a halacha, there's a reshus the Torah gave for healers to heal. Which implies, as the Gemara says specifically, that without this permission, they wouldn't have this permission. Only God is the healer. Ani Hashem reifecha. But He gave permission to human beings in the Shutuf HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ma'aseh Bereishis as a partnership, or he gave them the tools, and Kamuvin only as channels of healing, because ultimately God heals. Good doctors will tell you the body has its own healing powers. All we can do is facilitate, activate, ignite, stimulate these healing forces. So the Torah also describes what defines a doctor in every given field. How do we know what's a true doctor? Al pi Torah. The Rebbe writes in several letters, he says, Gota Reife Mumche, Reife Yedid Mumche, Reife. And when he was asked, what does a Reife mean? He says a Reife is based on the credentials that the particular society. In other words, a Reife, a doctor, is not appointed by rabbis. A doctor is not appointed by a committee. We do trust the system, even though you can say it may be corrupt and everyone who goes to medical school comes out the best doctor. Not necessarily. But that's what we go with. Because the Torah itself, just like it gave a Reife Reshus L'Rapis, he also gave a system, Reshus, to designate who's a doctor. And remember, this is medical things, and the fact is medical school is intense, and we have lawsuits, and we have protection, and so on. Is it perfect? We all know it's far from perfect. There's plenty of malpractice, there's plenty of mistakes made, even mistakes that are covered up, and this is a common thing. But we have to work with what we have, and the Torah tells us, if the Rebbe felt that the doctors are all corrupt, he would not send anyone to a doctor. Obviously, there has to be an element of trust, and you don't just go, you go with references, you go with doctors who refer, you have a second opinion, then you have a third opinion if you need the third opinion, if the two opinions disagree. It's a common answer from the Rebbe. What you see from this, that there's a trust in the system, and the system is not mandated by the Torah, gives it a permission, it's mandated by the Torah, the concept, but to define the credentials of a doctor, that you rely on the system, the universities, the doctors that when they get their degrees, they do their residency and so on, and then they become practicing doctors. And we rely that there's a system that checks and balances with all the knowledge and qualifications of the imperfections of the system. Same thing we do with the bar with lawyers. Lawyers they're all ethical, they're all competent, and they're all human beings. Doctors have been known to do things abusive, lawyers as well. I'm just pointing out that the Torah trusts, however, the system. When it comes to who's a Rav, they're the Torah, not no college and no committee. There's a Torah gives criteria how a person becomes a Rav. But a doctor, this was also part of the Nitn Reshus L'Reif L'Rapis. So bottom line is, we need to look at the criteria that exists, which gets into the whole discussion of alternative medicine altogether. Does the Torah mandate it? Does it allow it? It's not a question that you can answer easily, because there are doctors themselves that reject certain alternative medicine, and there are doctors that embrace it. There are doctors that have all kinds of a whole repertoire, and they include alternative and Eastern and other methods that some consider somewhat a little dubious. So here too, consensus is always the best approach. You have to find someone you trust, someone that others trust, and then get a second opinion. Not like that arrogant doctor that said, I'll tell you when you need a second opinion. If you're telling me when I need a second opinion, it's not a second opinion, then it's you. So that's part of it, to always check and balance. That's why we have the right and the ability in this free society to double check. So to go back now to your question, I am not here to paskin or to determine who's fraud or who's not a fraud. First of all, I don't know the situation. I don't know who's writing. For all I know, this writer could be in themselves someone like this, and they feel the competition is taking away business from them. God forbid, I'm not trying to throw any lack of credibility of the letter. I just want to point out, when you're open-minded, you have to keep all possible possibilities, because you never know why someone is writing something. I am taking becheskes kashas that this letter is coming from a sincere place, and there's no negei b'davar. Let's just assume that. But you have to then determine what is actually a fraud. Are you right that these people have no accreditation? Is it all correct? Have you confirmed it all? And again, I'm not throwing aspirations on this. I'm not trying aspersions, I should say, on this letter. But you have to, for someone have to investigate it, they'd have to look at it with clear, objective eyes. You can't just rely. But let's assume everything here is correct. So listen, people make mistakes. The rabbi may be misinformed, or there may be other things going on that I'm not aware of. And we have ways of clarifying these things. And I say this to the public, and I say it to every individual, including this writer. Do we have to go to war against someone you may think is a fraud? There's ways to do it before you go to war. There's ways to do it diplomatically, behind the scenes. If it's a good Rav in a city, a good rabbi, he will do it diplomatically. If you see, for example, people doing things that they're making money and they're not really equipped to do so, you always go b'darkei noyam first. If you see real damage was done, it's mamish b'koach nefesh, psychologically speaking, or in other ways, clearly you have to take stronger measures. But this is no different than any problem in a community. Any community suffering with some type of corruption, not just medical, has to address it. If you're a healthy community, you're responsible for your community. The whole din of Egla Arufa is based on a community responsibility for anyone who even visits their city. The din is that the whole Egla Arufa mitzvah is that if someone's found, God forbid, dead, so the closest city is responsible because they're responsible for the leviyah, for the escorting and protecting of anyone that comes in their vicinity. It's the basis of every community is responsible for their community. Now the question whether communities are living up to their responsibility. Do we have the proper leaders? But in a sense, this problem is part of all problems in any given situation. But to specifically speak about this, the way to do it is to first establish the facts. Do the people have the credentials? Do they not? People should be aware of entitled transparency. Listen, anyone can go to any quack, and you can't necessarily control them, but they should know it's a quack, or they should know it's somebody who doesn't have credentials. People are desperate, emotionally vulnerable, and often can be misled simply because they're desperate. I've seen this all the time. Responsible people have to make aware the community. This may not be legitimate, may be alternative, but that's why we have legitimate doctors and we have legitimate practitioners who do have credentials. And some of them may be closed-minded. Some may say, I don't like alternative medicine. So find a second doctor. There are many options today. You get on the phone, you speak to people, you do your due diligence, and number one, establish whether it's indeed someone who's really destructive. If they are, you bring it to the attention of your local rabbi or those that you can, that have some effect. Do it discreetly. There's no reason to embarrass or no reason to make a chilul Hashem. If at the end of the day all this doesn't work and you really feel that there's some real danger, then absolutely it can't be quiet. And the question whether to say to authorities or to find enough people, it's always best to do it not alone because you want to make sure you're 100% right. This has been this issue regarding the whole issue of child molestation, exposing molesters, not exposing, and obviously making sure that the absolute, without a shred of doubt, because you can't destroy people's lives just because of a rumor. And then if they're a danger to others, there's dinim. A din of a reidif, of someone running in the street with a knife, is very different than the din of someone who insulted you. A reidif is a direct threat, and the concepts of mesira, of informing, or calling the police, don't apply. Very simple, because it's a threat. Guys with a knife. So there's a din reidif also in the healing department, if that can be established. You have to go very carefully and very responsibly, not through panic and not through hysteria, in a very deliberate fashion, step by step by step. Bottom line is that Rabbeim support what it says in Torah. The Torah says the doctor has to be a legitimate doctor. First of all, there's the life and death at stake, psychological life and death. And if someone is a practitioner who may not have all those credentials, does he have or she have an endorsement from someone that does? It's as simple as that. In this world, peers are the ones that give the endorsements and support of something else. Is it always perfect? Again, I qualify it's not, but it's what we have. And the more, if you're a practitioner, it's your duty and responsibility to put at ease such accusations and make sure that you have the right credentials or the right support, and that what you're doing, as good with all your good intentions, has to be humbly understood as serving the people, not serving yourself. There was one practitioner, or whatever you want to call him, that once came to me, wanted to do a partnership with me. I find myself in a situation when I hear about healing in this nature, spiritual healing, it comes down to the Rebbe. There's no better spiritual healer than the Rebbe. What was the Rebbe's model? You came to him in Yechidus, or you wrote him a letter. You put in a pan. Usually people accompany it with some tzedakah, charity, any amount they wanted, because that's a keli for the bracha. And you asked for a bracha. There were no fees. There was no milking anyone. It was never done for money. It was done because the soul doctor is a soul doctor. So whenever you bring money into the picture, always rest assured it creates bias. If someone's making a parnasa from this, they are blinded to see whether they're really doing the best, they're giving the best advice. But this is also true for lawyers and for any type of practitioner. That's why we need to have accountability and the checks and balances necessary. I hope this suffices to answer the question, at least the basic principles. If there are follow-up, more specifics, absolutely feel free to write. And of course, contact and consult your local rabbi, your local shliach, your local mashpia, local someone that can trust, because always local. Politics is always local. The Rebbe always says, you solve issues on al-asar. So a zettel from the Rebbe recently, the Rebbe said, you cannot be menayel a mesid, you can't lead a mesid me'ever leyam, al pidin v'shulchan aruch, that's what the Rebbe said. Al pitera v'shulchan aruch, osur. It's forbidden to run an organization me'ever leyam from across, from a distance, from the sea, across the sea, which means from another country, from another place. And the Rebbe writes, v'din zeh chal gam alai. This din also applies to me. Just interesting as an aside. Let's go to the next question, which is very much associated with the 9 days and Tisha B'Av. Loneliness. Loneliness. And we'll discuss why it's associated if you haven't guessed it yourself. Question 1. I'd like to ask about how to deal with loneliness. There are many people with many relatives and friends. They have no clue what it is like not to have many or any relatives. And they are happy with superficial interrelationships with people they do not need. But Chassidus talks about having a community in Avos Yisrael. I know this is New York City, but I suspect this problem is endemic to modern society, which has affected our Chassidic society as well. What can people do in order to care more about each other and become less self-absorbed? Question number 2. In the bracket it says really dark. So maybe this is viewer discretion advised. Not sure. I'm in so much pain. I'm sitting at a coffee table, holding back from crying, lonely. I don't feel like I have friends. I'm not happy. I'm scared, afraid. This feeling inside of me is killing me. What I would like is to go away and start new, meet new people, make a life for myself. I can't take this any longer. I think I'm waiting for something big to happen. Someone will come out and just pick me up and show me that I am amazing, that life is not over, and I rock. Realizing that it's never going to happen unless I do it to myself. I just don't feel like I can. I'm in this hole which I dug. I'm so scared. Living by a friend, family house is not helping at all. I was thinking of putting myself in a homeless shelter. I don't want to be here living with this feeling thoughts. I'm not religious, not praying, no faith, no trust, no kosher, stole money. That's why I got fired. Now selling pills to have some money. My thoughts are around lawyer, court, money. I don't know who I became. I think I'm going to buy a one-way ticket, most likely to India, and just go and make a life, which everyone will tell me that's running away. Stay and deal with your life. Well, I can't call wanting to kill myself life. Very sad. Another few questions in this regard. Why is it so hard as a convert and Baal Tshuva to get into the religious community? Even though my children go to the Chabad school, the religious friends and their parents don't bond with us outside of school. Especially at the beginning of becoming religious, it would be so important to have a religious environment and friends and support. Also for my children, because just with me alone, I'm a single mom. It is boring to spend Shabbos and holidays. The old friends we cannot really visit so much anymore because their interests are now not the same anymore, and they try to pull us back. Excuse me. We get sometimes invited for a Shabbat meal, but that's about it. All the laws of minhagim we have to learn from books, and that's also a bit hard because it takes so much time. It's quite lonely to become religious. It is shiurim like yours that keep me going. I think many people that become religious have the same problem. Thank you so much for taking your time. All the best. And finally, I try to live doing everything with a higher purpose, but it's affecting my human relationships. I can't relate to others on a purely human level, void of any agenda or bringing in God. But no one wants to be friends with someone who's always holier than thou and seems to have a hidden agenda. How do I interact with those around us? Which quite honestly are downright human in their life attitude. Not necessarily looking for God in social interactions. They're not looking for you to be a mashpia, but a friend to hang out with, schmooze with, and have a good time. And just enjoy life. These are most of my neighbors, my shul members, whom I fail to connect with because I see no place for it as a chassid. But on the other hand, it feels awfully lonely to live like this. It seems that I'm too intense to just relate to others. I feel like I must have misunderstood what the Rebbe Chassidus demands of us. Can you please clarify? Yeah. Well, it saddens me as it saddens anyone that has a little empathy in their heart when you read these type of letters. And however, the Torah and Chassidus, if they don't address this, what do they address? They don't only address happy times, they address our challenges. As I began in the beginning of this episode, the 9 days is the archetype for loneliness. We have a calendar, a Jewish calendar. As we know, according to Judaism, time is energy. So different times of energy in the year. Adar is the time of joy. And Av is its antithesis. Its alter ego is the time of sadness. So what better time to address this issue? So firstly, I want to say my heart goes out to anyone who's written these letters, anyone in this situation. And remember, we all have times of loneliness. It's all a question of how it manifests. Don't think that just because somebody looks successful and they look like they're smiling and happy, they never have a lonely moment. There's a thing called existential loneliness. You sometimes see the Rabbeim would cry for no apparent reason. Each of us, I'm sure, has moments like that. Not because something happened, not because there's a loss. There's sometimes you just sense the darkness of life in general, the existential loneliness of existence. We're on our own in many ways. Sometimes we walk, we could be partying, we go to Farbringen and all that. At the end of the day, you go home alone. But you come to learn that you're really never alone. That's the response to all these questions. Loneliness is one of the worst and possible experiences a person could have. And let me begin with a pasuk in Eicha, the pasuk in Eicha which we read Tisha B'Av night. Eicha Yoshva Bodad. Yirmiyahu is lamenting. Woe, alas, she sits alone. Bodad is the word for alone. The big question is, the Churban Beis Hamikdash, the destruction of the temple, wasn't just Jerusalem's desolation and loneliness. It also dealt with destruction of the Holy of Holies, the Beis Hamikdash itself, the death and murder of so many individuals, the beginning of a long exile, being chased out and dispersed all over the earth, ultimately. So why of all things does Eicha begin? Does Yirmiyahu see the loneliness is what bothered him? First thing, the opening sentence of everything is like your first reaction. Whoa, she sits alone. So I remember a number of years ago I did a radio show. I had a live radio show in New York. I was on WEVD, if you recall WEVD, before it became ESPN. WEVD, so 6 to 7 every Sunday evening I did the show. It was the live call-ins. And I talked about topics similar to some of the topics we're addressing here, but somewhat different as well. One Sunday that I spoke was on the topic of loneliness. It was the Sunday before Tisha B'Av, which was also then on a Tuesday. I happened to be in Los Angeles that Sunday, so I had to do it from there. But I went to see my good friend that some of you may have heard of. His name is Leonard Cohen. And he's a singer-songwriter, and he, in some ways, had made depression and loneliness somewhat fashionable, if you could call it that. So we're speaking, and I told him in a few hours I have to do this show. And LA is 3 hours ahead of New York time. And he said to me, use my studio. He had a studio in the back. So I took the opportunity. I said, maybe, Leonard, you want to come onto the show? Of all people, you're an expert on loneliness. No, it's too complicated because he would need permissions because of his legal contracts. It was not possible. But he said, I'll give you a poem that I've never, ever publicized on the topic of loneliness. You can read it, which I did. And you probably can find the transcript of the show online on meaningfullife.com. And I asked this question about Eicha. And the answer that I submit, I've not seen it in a Sikha or in a Maimed. I say that right now. If someone sees it somewhere like that, please share that with me. Because if we were not alone, we could handle almost any challenge, if not any challenge. There's two problems when something happens to someone. The loss itself, the pain itself, the wound, and then the sense of loneliness that nobody is there with me. Nobody can understand me. Nobody wants to be with me. Who wants to be with someone in such misery? Isolation. And Yirmiyahu realized that yes, many tragic things happen. Some of them were worse per se than loneliness. But as long as people feel that we're together with others, together we can overcome anything. That's what the Jewish people always knew. And that's why Chassidus, many Pizgomim from the Baal Shem Tov, and the Alter Rebbe, and the Magid, and the Alter Rebbe, and all the way to the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe, Chassidim sind nicht elend. Chassidim are never alone. Chassidim ein Mishpacha, they're one family. Avos and Achdus Yisrael in Chassidus is a fundamental principle. Of course, it's a pasuk in Torah, V'ahavta Lecha Kamecha, building kehillas, being community, caring about someone else. But Chassidus made it a big emphasis, as many other things, even though they're fundamentals in Torah, because it was either forgotten or became text, mechanical. Why is it so important? Because if you want to be a real person, if you want to spiritually flourish, we need each other. The Rebbe brings often the Rambam, Adam Medini. A person is a Medini. He's a social animal, a social creature, I should say. Medini. He needs others. Takim Eina Nili Mili, Hillel says, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? But he concludes on the second half, Imanila Atzmi, I am only for myself. Mani, what am I? So it's critical, both elements, when you're dealing with any of these situations described here. Number one, to find the strength to be yourself and realize that you have to be able to muster up and generate inner strength even when you feel alone. And two, Imanila Atzmi, to find others. So the answer is twofold. Now, obviously, to begin to build your own strength, sometimes you need others. It's a catch-22 situation, so every case is different. But I want to say this as I would say almost like a public call and declaration. I was very moved a number of months ago when I received a note in the context of my life, where a woman told me that she was having difficulty shalom bayis, and her neighbor, her landlord, heard the yelling, screaming. She realized there was tension. So she once approached her very discreetly, very quietly, very tactfully, and said to her, if you want to talk anytime. And they became friends. The inspiration she had was the Rebbe's call that people should be a mashpia. Mashpia doesn't mean you need 1,000 mushpayim, you could have one. But that she cared. We have to come out ourselves and teach our children and teach our neighbors. You have to take interest. You maybe have someone that you're living right next to who's just alone. You can't even know how much they're suffering. It's reaching out, a smile, a kind word. Obviously not trying to pry and to intrude or invade someone's private boundaries. No, an assault on someone's psyche has to be very careful of that. But Pashat Avos Yisrael, especially in this time, the 9 days, what better time, that Beis HaMikdash was destroyed because of Sinas Chinam. Sinas Chinam is the ultimate of loneliness. It's not just hatred, it's separation, complete pirut. So maybe it's connected to Eicha Yoshva Badad. The loneliness of Yerushalayim, direct result of the loneliness that the people imposed upon themselves by simply not only not caring about each other, but actually hurting each other, hating each other. How you misakim repair that? Through avos chinam, baseless, without a reason. Just say hello to someone for no reason, not because necessarily you never know. Obviously, if you witness something, again in a diplomatic and tactful way, find a way to reach the people. So I'm saying this now to all of us. If we did that, maybe some of these individuals would have someone to talk to. If you're in this type of situation, I'm going now reverse, what can you do? Well, never give up, number one. Find some siches, find some letters from the Rebbe, where the Rebbe talks about the strength that we get, and realize you're not alone. The fact that some people ignore you, or some people reject. Listen, human beings are petty, and unfortunately, even our more so-called observant and pious communities are not immune from being petty. You have to find individuals. In every community there are gems. They're beautiful people. And I would say everyone's a beautiful person, but sometimes there's attitudes that just become ingrained. And do not give up. Reach out. Do not bury yourself in your own misery and wallow in your own loneliness. It's critical to act on it. So, I know you could say all this is obvious. What I'm just trying to suggest is do not give up and do whatever you can. You know, to the person that says, I'm in so much pain and all of that, I say the same thing. But I want to add something else. I want to add, you must find activities that give you some measure of contentment and satisfaction. If you don't have activities like that, what happens is you end up being drawn down even more in your loneliness. If you have something to turn to, it's like, think of it like diversification. It could be a lot of parts of your life you find difficulty. But you find joy in one thing, in your children, in a project you're doing, in a hobby, in a volunteer effort, in your work. The best defense ultimately is offense, is the Chassidishe approach. In the letters and the sikhs and the Maimorim that talk about these topics, always best defense is offense. Offense means fill your life up with something positive. So though it may not directly attack your lonely state of being, or the other things described in these letters to me, what happens is that positive energy begins to spill over and gives you strength to deal with the more negative. As I said, we all have those moments, sometimes more than moments. And usually what solves it is that you have other forces that wash over and are able to lift you up during those more difficult times. You see this continuously. You're preparing the years for plenty for the years of famine. So besides the dealing with the short term of never giving up and reaching out to whoever you can, there's also doing things, building something in your life that you feel proud of. Every day feel proud about something, guaranteed that even the lonely moments will become weaker. And more importantly, you'll develop confidence to be able to deal with that as well. Because we have the catch-22, as I mentioned. We have the vicious cycle. When you're lonely, you become despair. And when you're in despair, nobody wants to talk to you. You go to people, you're giving off negative energy. Who wants to sit with someone who's kvetching all the time? There are people who are tzaddikim who can handle that. But many people don't have the patience for it. So you become, people say, oh no, that person's coming my direction again. They start avoiding you. I'm not saying that's justified. You have to start giving off positive energy, and positive energy comes from doing something positive, finding something. So it's one thing complaining, another is to find something. And you have to reach to someone that can help you find that thing and build on it. I mentioned the previous episode, one of the ways to help deal with your own issue is to help someone else who has that same issue. I don't know if there's a thing called Loneliness Anonymous. It may be another conundrum, but the question, they say misery loves company. I don't know if loneliness loves company, but the fact of the matter is, sometimes if you've gone through it and you've done something, it would be good, you'd have an ability to reach to other people this way. And there are different types of people. People are more introverted, people are more extroverted. There's a lot of case by case here that's difficult to address in every particular way. At the end of the day, you cannot allow yourself to just become overtaken by despair and give up. We have to hold on to things. We hold on, learning Torah, doing a mitzvah, bring simcha to others. Find something that gives you some positive strength. Again, I am sorry if I sound a little generic here. Try to be as specific as possible to the questions that were asked. But again, if there's follow-up, please let me know. Talking about introverted, let me just go to the next topic. Mivtzoyim for introverted. Okay. Thank you, Rabbi Jacobson, for this video series. I have been watching every week since the beginning, and it is real mechaya to watch your shiurim, which helped me throughout the week. You're very welcome. Your compassionate yet matter-of-fact approach is very inspiring and shows the viewer your true concern for the issues you are addressing. You should continue to be matzliach in all your holy endeavors. Amen, I say. I wanted to ask you a question about something that I've been thinking about since I left yeshiva. It was made crystal clear that Mivtzoyim are the campaigns and any type of effort that Rebbe initiated for us to go out and reach to other Jews, other people. So Mivtzoyim is of utmost importance to the Rebbe. It is a piece of the puzzle in order to bring us closer to Yemei Mashiach, and we clearly see individuals involved in Mivtzoyim as a result of their dedication to the Rebbe. I have to be honest and say that I would then, when I was in yeshiva, still do go to do Mivtzoyim. Yet I always found it very uncomfortable to approach strangers, especially when the majority of people I approached wanted nothing to do with me. I agree this should not be a deterrent because of how important Mivtzoyim is, or are, yet I find that I'm doing no service because I'm not wired to be an extrovert. I remember seeing other introverts in yeshiva, even being turned off as a result of being peer pressured into Mivtzoyim, and as a result just found themselves miserable because they are doing something that is against their nature. So I have two questions. Is there a way to do Mivtzoyim that is more fitting for an introverted individual? And B, that was A. B, is my approach altogether wrong, and does Chassidus require introverts to break their nature and try to be more extroverted, especially when it's for the sake of helping fellow Jews? An excellent question. Not to suggest the other ones were not. So, let's address this. The Rambam paskins in Hilchos Shuvah, and the Rebbe brings it in many places, as well as in Chassidus, that human beings, based on the Gemara, ein deis ein shavos, ein partzef ein shavos, just like our faces are not alike, our personalities, our way of thinking is not alike. We're wired differently. Yes, there are people who are more extrovert, people more introvert. There's no such thing as just being one. There's usually hiskalos, like 60-40, 70-30, 80-20. But yes, there are people who have a primary feature. People just naturally social. Others are naturally internal. You find in Tanya and the Torah as well, people more shchera, more leveina. More shchera means more of a darker disposition. More leveina is a lighter, like leveina, shchera, dark and light, white, a lighter disposition. The Alter Rebbe says when you have more shchera, it actually can be used. It's very conducive for study, scholarship, and learning Torah, because you're more into yourself when a person is in that state. More leveina is for a person who's more involved with others. In Torah, he speaks about the second point you make, that it's important to change our nature, to go against our nature, not change. To go against our nature. It's a person he was a Chanani ben Tradjan, who was very benevolent, always giving. His Aveda was to know how to rein in more gvura, not just chesed. Someone who's a more gvura person has to learn to introduce more chesed. That's Avedas Hashem, working on ourselves. But that's, I just wanted to say as a general. So the fact that each of us has a different personality is not only fine, it's the way we were created. No one's asking us to change our colors, to change our wiring. The question is how you channel it. I would submit that Mivtzoyim has many ways to be experienced, as you alluded to. People have different strengths. The Rebbe, just an example, would speak about men and women. He'd say women have, because of their gentler nature, more feminine approach, can reach the heart more often. So their disposition allows them to do Mivtzoyim in that type of fashion. The same thing can be applied to extroverts and introverts. An extrovert may be someone who, wherever he goes, is very gregarious, is always with other people, social, and so on. But the responsibility we have for other Jews is whether you're extrovert or introvert. The question is how you do it. Now, it's true that we grew up in the yeshiva system. Mivtzoyim meant you went in a mitzvah tank to a corner, whether it's in New York or wherever it was, and you asked, are you Jewish? You put on film, neshek, whatever it was. First of all, whoever said Mivtzoyim was limited to that approach, that was an approach, the mitzvah tank approach. The Rebbe spoke about it, Yud Beis Tammuz Tov Shalom and Daled, explaining why like a tank. Some people saw it as wild, just going into the street, just going up to someone who's a stranger. Are you Jewish? But in wild times, in strange times, the Rebbe said you need strange methods. A tank just breaks through boundaries and barriers. But whoever said it's limited to that? What about if you invite someone that you meet, come to Shabbos? Maybe the introvert should be sitting with him and having a conversation. It's not about numbers. So you have to use your personality, directing it towards the Rebbe shlichus. There's no question every person can do that. You do it in different ways. So to start comparing, I didn't speak to 1,000 strangers like my social extroverted friend did. Since when there was this type of contest based on numbers like that? Yeah, listen, sometimes incentive people would come back, 100 film, 50 kakaftas, etc. But the point I'm making here is, that's how we deal with on a very basic level. The Rebbe's approach was talking to all of us. And each has its own strength. To force yourself to completely go against your nature is something that's repulsive. I wouldn't go force. But to say just be in your comfort zone is also not a derech. You go, for example, to an event, to a party, you're on a plane. Do you speak to the person sitting near you? Many people are very introverted, will not even say hello, or maybe they'll say hello and be cordial. Why not say something? You're not, are you Jewish? You start talking, where are you from? I'm from New York, you're flying this. Are you from here? You're from there. You suddenly find out the person may be Jewish. Even if they're not Jewish, there's also a message to say to them as the Rebbe speaks. So whether you're introvert, extrovert, that may be going out of your comfort zone. Listen, I know many extroverts that don't want to speak to someone next sitting near them. Or if they do, it's only about their own social issues. They want to talk to them what book they read or other things I don't want to mention. So The point is to go against your nature and get out of your comfort zone and do what the Rebbe wants you to do. Speak to them about something meaningful. Tell them, when you get back home, if you'd like to contact me, I'll be happy to speak to you. You'll be surprised how many people you can meet like this. Mivtzoyim is many, many forms. It really means wherever you go, you're an agent, you're an ambassador. Everyone you meet, you should be speaking to. But not necessarily in extroverted fashion. Maybe it's an introverted fashion. If you were an introvert and you saw someone sinking in an ocean, but you know how to swim, would you say, it's not for me, because I don't know this person, I'll bring the extrovert lifeguard? No, because life and death. If it was your own brother and sister calling for help, you wouldn't start analyzing your personality. However, you have to do it your way. That's the key. The key is to get out of your comfort zone in doing what's right. Doesn't mean always changing your whole personality. That's not what we're discussing here. Nowhere does it say in the Torah that an extrovert or introvert is the way to be. It doesn't say chayiv liyas introvert or asur liyas extrovert or vice versa. So these are just two personality features that each of us have, different forms. And there's many others. I'm just addressing it this way. You have to find your way, and most importantly, not do things that are just comfortable because it's easy for you. Find a way to do it. Find a way to speak to someone. Find a way to reach them. So, sometimes introverts respond to introverts. Extroverts turn off introverts. You won't go over to someone who's a very introverted person, very introspective, very quiet, and you give them this whole social thing. That may not be the way to reach them. If you're an introvert, maybe those are the people that you should be looking for. But regardless, you can't always tell. Maybe you could. But every person needs a friend. As I spoke before about loneliness, that's our mission. Using the words of the Rebbe that I spoke in the previous episode about chinuch. Das Elyon, the Rebbe wants us to be ambassadors, agents. We're coming here to change things. We're not just here to survive and make it through. You go on a plane, you get off the plane, you did something different and changed somebody on that airplane. You traveled somewhere, you changed the environment. You met somebody, you heard something from them, they said something to you. Because from Sheishis Yemei Bereishis, like the famous story that the Alter Rebbe said with Mordechai Chaim Rappaport, that from Sheishis Yemei Bereishis, that brook of water was waiting for you to come there and make a blessing on it. So you could have just passed and say, hey, I'm not thirsty right now, but that's what it's waiting for. And the same has to be an attitude, whether you're an extrovert or an introvert. Let's go to the next question, and that is, I'm going to do making it financially and tuition costs in the coming episode because I see time is limited. I'd rather give more time for that. I want to deal with grown, estranged children. Question. What topic is the best to talk with a son who is far, far away? My son is far away, out of reach, in U.S. Air Forces. He calls very randomly and doesn't talk much. Whenever I ask him a question, he stops me abruptly, noticing that he cannot talk on this topic and the position he's in. We were not able to build good relationship for years, and now when he is so far, it's even harder to break the ice. What do you think would be the best strategy? How can I engage him in conversation? What should I do not to lose him completely and try to keep up tiny, if any, light in his soul? Question number 2. In my second marriage, my husband and I became frum. My children from my previous marriage do not understand why I have chosen this lifestyle and choose to keep a safe distance. What can I do to bridge the gap? I love my children and want the best for them. How can I maintain involvement in their lives on their terms while trying to bring a little bit of Yiddishkeit, Chassidus, into our interactions? Yeah, in the bizarre twists and turns of life, unfortunately, this is part of the whole deeper mysteries that God set into motion, especially in this last generation. Maybe it's due to the final birurim, when you finish cleaning up the tzike data, the edges of the pot, the shards, the remains, then things are somewhat out of whack. Like the Friedrich Rebbe Rashab writes in Kunter Semayan, the Rebbe brings it that chatef achel, chatef v'shti. Grab whatever you can, chatef achel, grab what you can eat, grab what you can drink, because today there's no seder in birurim. That's the language there. Once when we wrote it in a sikha, the Rebbe wrote, we don't know the seder in birurim. There's another discussion. Is there a Seder today and we don't know it, or there's no Seder? But the point is, it's definitely bizarre and twists and turns, sometimes worse than that, where in a normal world, our children would be sitting at our tables, continuing and perpetuating the traditions and Chassidus that we grew up with in a seamless, healthy way. But there are today many winds that are blowing. I believe I mentioned weeks ago the word the Rebbe told to our father, who was bemoaning the fact that his child left, so to speak. I don't even know what words to use. The Rebbe does not like the word distant, because every Jew remains close. But let's say begole be'enei basar, not exactly the way we expected. So he was bemoaning all this, and the Rebbe was consoling him. But then he said to the Rebbe, there's an American expression that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And that's what I'm concerned with most. That's not about my son, it's about me. He didn't fall far, it was me. And the Rebbe responded to him and said, it's a true pisgum, it's a true statement. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, but only when there's ruchis regilis, when there's regular winds blowing. Ruchis mitzuyas. Today there are ruchis she'enim mitzuyas, winds that are irregular winds. When an irregular wind is blowing, gale forces, hurricanes, tornadoes, or whatever it may be, psychologically and spiritually and Jewish-wise speaking, it can blow an apple very far from the tree. Interesting to analyze. First of all, the Rebbe giving strength to someone to realize, don't wallow in your guilt. It's not about you. And above all, to think about your child. And this brings me to the answer here. This is your child, it's your flesh and blood. It's an neshama the Eibush to send down to this earth. Never ever forget that. Wherever this neshama has ended up, whether it's in the U.S. Air Force or in any other place that you and I or others may find to be not a place where a Jew should be, it's still a neshama. And al pi halacha, that person should be saying in the morning, neshama shenasata bi teherihi. Teherihi, because the neshama remains intact. Think of it like a healthy heart, but the arteries may be somewhat clogged. Never forget, and it's your neshama. It's part of your family. It's your child. Nothing closer than a child. So as difficult as it may be, we have to sometimes transcend what we consider to be the pattern, the trajectory, the storyline that we would have hoped for when that child was born into our homes. A mother, when that child left its mother's womb, or a father, when you took care of that child from the youngest age, and then the child ends up in places you don't think they should be or don't belong. You have to, it's as hard as it is, the Aveda of a Chassid, is you have to transcend your vision. It didn't go the way you're planned. To keep saying, I should have done this, I should have done that, that's definitely not the approach. At this point, you have to accept, for now at least, this stage of the journey of this soul. It definitely has a shlichus, never changes. However, it's now taken on, maybe it has to find a birur, a spark that God sent, and it could only be this way. Maybe it could have been a different way, but this is how it ended up. So number one, the love, the unconditional love has to continuously flow from you. And do not think in terms, my child is distant. It breaks my heart when I hear you say, the child is so far. It's not far. It's the same flesh and blood. Just because if he lived in your community and came to your Shabbos table, that would make him closer. That would mean his proximity is closer. He's doing what you do. He's never far. He's still your child. He's not doing the way you would have liked, or he's not doing what Torah says right now. You have to sometimes overlook that and find ways to communicate that type of love. Break the ice. You shouldn't have to break the ice. Exude warmth. And you may need some coaching. Find ways to speak to your child, maybe an adult child, find something. And not manipulative, and not like waiting to spring on him or her. When are you going to do the next mitzvah? I can't wait till you come for Pesach or whatever. Speak as a child to a parent to a child. Human, be human. That's the most important thing. I cannot see a child not responding to a human parent. I could see a child closing down if they see there's even subtly an agenda that you want something from them. You're not here to do Mivtzoyim with your children. You did your part when you were mechanech them. The best you could do, hopefully. Now they are where they are. Now they need you as a parent. That's where things begin. And if you are natural in and transcending your own comfort and discomfort, guaranteed. There's no question. I could sense it in the words. Just the way you write to me, I'm sure your son feels your discomfort, and therefore he's not comfortable speaking to you, so he has other things to do. Why should he feel uncomfortable? Make sure the next phone call is a comfortable one. Find words, and if you don't speak to someone, what would you say? Sometimes Yiddishkeit and religion can become a block, as strange as it may sound, because you get trapped that that's the standard. The standard is what God wants, not what you and I want. Right now, your child is where they are. You have to find a way to be there for them. And the same I say to the second questioner. Of course we want every child to be connected to Hashem through Torah and mitzvahs. But the first thing as a parent is love. If you don't show love to your child, you think your child's going to be connected to Torah and mitzvahs. Let's not kid ourselves. They'll say the first mitzvah should be, you should love me. Why don't you love me unconditionally? You only love me when I do mitzvahs. As important as they may be. That's the challenge we have. There was a mother that once called me, frantic. She had a 17-year-old child who, and I believe I may have told the story, who stopped coming to Shabbos night, to Shabbos tables, refused to be participant, and was causing a lot of trouble. Would go out late at night, never come home, no rules. She tried with goodness, with good. She tried with punishment, with discipline, with incentives. Nothing worked. And he was messing up the whole family dynamic because they're younger children. Throw the child out of the home, she didn't want to. But it was a mess. It was like the whole life. Everything was, every time they spoke, it was only arguments. What should she do? You know, as the more she was speaking, the more I felt I have no idea what to tell her. But then suddenly, something struck me. I said, here's my advice. When's the last time you had a normal conversation with your son? She couldn't even remember. I said, tonight, get a babysitter for your younger children. Take your child out to dinner. A nice restaurant in New York. And don't talk about any Yiddishkeit. Don't talk about any of the rules, just as a mother to a child. Talk about when you were 17. Talk about your challenges. Do not discuss. And even after dessert, when he's already warmed up, don't spring it like he'll say, the whole thing was in order for you to try to manipulate. She said, I don't feel comfortable doing it. And that's when I knew that was the best advice I can give. The more discomfort she voiced, the more I knew this is what she had to do. I said, how could a mother say that? A mother can't go to dinner with her own son? This son that you carried for 9 months, that you fed, that you nurtured, that you took to school every day? I don't know. I don't know what to say. So I said, this is where you have the challenge. Anyway, I said, not with your husband, no protection, no buffers, go with your son. To her credit, she did it. She called me later and said that it was very decent, it was normal, he was very surprised, which is exactly what I wanted to achieve, that disarm. Not manipulatively, just have break the pattern, the routine of just arguing or ignoring or Cold War or hot war. Slowly they began a communication, and one day she called me and she said to me, you know something, the real pain I have is not about my son, it's about me. I was a Baal Tshuva. I had to pay a heavy price. I had a wealthy family. They cut off completely from me when I became frum. And as difficult as it was, I still did it. I came to a community that I thought was very welcoming. Then I realized all the cracks in the community. I was really very much alone. But I always console myself with one thing. I'm ready to suffer for my own family, for my own community. But one thing, my children will have a fresh beginning. They'll go to the yeshiva system. They'll do what they have to do. I'm ready to do that sacrifice. So when I see my son rejecting what I embraced, that breaks my heart. And I realize it's about me. It's true, he has to go on his journey and I have to be there for him. A line of communication opened up. I can't say it's perfect, but it's no longer war. He's already doing things just simply as a mensch, because there's humanity came back into the picture. We cannot replace humanity with God. We cannot replace humanity with Torah mitzvahs. Torah mitzvahs is meant l'tzarafes abriyas, to bring us together. It's meant to make us more, the best we can be as humans. The human being was created b'tzelem Elokim, not to replace the human, but to make the human divine. And that is ultimately, we have to dig deeper. And these type of crises or situations force you to become a better parent. Because when things are going regular, you're an automatic pilot, you do the regular. When there's a challenge, can you dig up, muster, and find within yourself the deeper love that comes only when there's a time of crisis? The deeper love that also God has when Jews are in a time of crisis. So being that we're at the conclusion of this episode, there's still other topics, but as always, there's always a spillover to the next episode. I want to conclude being that we're in the 9 days, and just like with parents and children, human parents, the same thing with God, Avinu Shebashamayim. The 9 days is an opportunity, like I said at the outset, when the kruvim, the cherubs faced each other. The deepest love is seen in the deepest darkness. So as parents, we can learn a lesson from that. What's the holiest day of the year? Yom Kippur. Because Yom Kippur came after the breaking of the first luchos, which came because of the golden calf. The deepest love, the deepest connection came through a crisis. That's how we parents have to learn from challenges. All of us have to learn from challenges. It's a lesson across the board in any type of challenge. So may Hashem help that in these 9 days, as we approach Tisha B'Av, this deepest love should finally be revealed. Not in a hidden way, it finally be revealed as the Rebbe cried so many times, and the efforts that he placed to somewhat reveal the deeper love, the deeper light in this darkest time. And Tisha B'Av should become the greatest holiday. With that, let's conclude MyLife, Chassidus Applied, episode 28. And until next week, Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m., our regular time, everyone should have a revealed light and a revealed loving week, and there should be shalom everywhere. And we should have shalom bin parents to children, husbands and wives, families, communities, and finally, Barchenu Avinu Kulanu Ke'echad. As we stand as one, we'll have the greatest brachas and blessings. Thank you very much.